Good afternoon, and welcome into the Live from the Plains podcast. I am Daniel Locke. To my right is Logan Fowler, and this is the day that we would normally preview Auburn's opponent for the week, but since it's a bye week, we have a very special treat for you today. We're going to be talking recruiting with Christian Clemente of Auburn Undercover over at 247 Sports. Christian, how are you today?
I'm good. How about you guys?
Doing great. Really appreciate you coming on. Logan, how's your fall break been so far?
It's been good, man. I got to sleep in today, have no worries. Got a tea time in about 2 hours. So
There we go.
That's why we had to bump it up, huh?
yeah, well, yeah.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Fair enough. So, Christian is the man when it comes to Auburn recruiting. This guy's the best. I'm sure a lot of you already are, but if you aren't, give him a follow on Twitter. Christian, what's your Twitter?
At cclemente247.
Get at him. He is the best at what he does. Logan, would you like to get this conversation started?
Yeah. I mean, so Christian, obviously all the news right now is around the commitment of Deuce Knight. Kind of a long drawn out recruitment. He was here, 3 out of the 4 first, or 4 out of the first 5 home games, something like that. So you finally get him on board. Kind of how did that recruitment go? What was the process like? And then also kind of as a recruiting insider, what was it kind of like to get to know him through the recruiting process?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk for 45 minutes on this show just going on his process and how Auburn kind of landed him. It was a headache a little bit, at least for us, to try and keep track of it because he visits the first visit. He had visited way back in spring of 2023 when he initially got offered. That was honestly when I got to know him first. And he's a great kid. I think Auburn fans will love getting to know him. Similar to Walker White a little bit, maybe not quite as outgoing publicly, but he's really great kid, really fun to talk with. But that was when I first got to know him. And then, he had, when the contact period opened up last summer, so the summer of 2023, Auburn was pursuing him pretty heavily. More of Hugh Freeze than Philip Montgomery, though. Philip Montgomery had some other guys. And so Deuce obviously ends up committing to Notre Dame. He's solid with them for close to a year until he goes to the Elite 11 there in June over in Los Angeles. And that was when things kind of started to pick up with him in Auburn again. Auburn got to see him perform in that Elite 11 from videos and whatnot, was really impressed. The Juju Lewis saga was continuing on and didn't look like there would be an end in sight, at least for a little bit. So Auburn kind of switched gears, started recruiting Deuce there really at the beginning of July, got him in for Big Cat Weekend. From that point on, it looked like Auburn would probably be the team to beat, especially when he visited for the Alabama A&M game. Some behind the scenes there is, and when he first arrived for that Alabama A&M game, he told a couple of people, that he was coming to Auburn, he was going to be committing to Auburn, and that he would do it for the Cal game. After the game, he told all the commits, and he told Hugh Freeze, either in the locker room or the Heisman room or something like that. I don't know that exact detail. I just know after the game, he told them, "Hey, I'm committing. Got a big rivalry game coming up in high school football the Friday before the Cal game. Want to play that, focus on that, and then I want to flip before the Cal game." Ends up talking with Notre Dame that week, decides to hold off. Everyone knows the cycle keeps continuing on and on. He keeps showing up, but he still keeps not doing anything. His official visit is there for the Oklahoma game, so the final home game. At that point, Auburn is kind of like, look, we've been patient. We've let you go through your process, but we need to know one way or the other because we've got another guy. Contact had never stopped with Juju Lewis in his camp, and there was a point there where he ends up visiting shortly before the Oklahoma game, pretty quietly, just to check out, talk with the coaches a little bit more. And Deuce comes on his OV that weekend, and then coming out of the OV, he decides, okay, you know what, I'm ready. I'm ready to pull the trigger. And he obviously does that Wednesday. Thankfully, that it's over now and don't have to worry about it.
Hey, yeah, I mean that sounds like a stressful process for you guys covering.
I mean, it's a lot for us covering it. The fans get so invested in it, but the thing I always try and tell fans is, look, it's so much more stressful for this kid than it is for anybody else. I mean, they're not making a 4-year decision. As coaches always say, it's a 40-year decision, and it's true. this will impact the rest of their life. So they need to make the right decision. And I don't blame them at any point. So
Absolutely. Obviously, with the Deuce Knight commitment, you've heard of guys like Auburn's obviously still pushing for Andrew Babalola, for Naheem Offord, Caleb Cunningham, some guys like those. Obviously, they've got their class kind of filled out. Got the number 3 class in the country according to 247. But what does the Deuce Knight commitment mean for those kind of guys? And obviously in their recruitment.
it certainly helps. Look, those guys, especially those elite guys, and you can tag in a guy like Caleb Cunningham there as well. Although that's almost different because he's a receiver, so it helps even more for a guy like that, knowing that he's got a quarterback he can catch passes from. But for guys like Naeem Offord and Andrew Babalola, look, they're winners. They want to play in an elite program, and Auburn's not showing that on the field this year. What they are showing is they're showing young guys playing well, the opportunity to play quickly, and they're showing a youth movement and moving forward that they will be improving and getting better is kind of what they're trying to sell. And so when you get a quarterback in the class, people would ask, why does Naeem Offord, who's a cornerback on the other side of the ball, even care about what Auburn has at quarterback? Well, he wants to win. He wants to be on a winning team. And having a quarterback it's the most important position on the field. It always is. It gets the most attention. So getting a guy like Deuce is huge there. B, he wants to compete against the best, whether it's in practice against a guy like Deuce or, whatever it is. It helps. And, it helps with a guy like Andrew Babalola. I don't think it's a huge, it gets them from here to here. It gets them over the hump, but it helps a little bit incrementally. And honestly, the biggest thing is the fact that Deuce is recruiting for you. That helps. It helps to have a guy like that. He's a 24/7 sports composite 5-star. We have him just outside of 5-star range. Having a guy like that being able to recruit other guys for you, that definitely helps a lot. Auburn does not sign the 2024 wide receiver class that it does if it doesn't have a guy like Walker White, an elite quarterback, recruiting some of those guys. That helps. Stuff like that helps.
Yeah. Obviously, like you mentioned, the quarterback's a big spot in the class to fill. Kind of moving on, we saw the running back Usman Chroma commit to Georgia over the weekend. Obviously, Auburn's been recruiting him. They have Alvin Henderson in the class, a guy like Mills Knight. Where's he commit? Ole Miss, right?
Yep.
Ole Miss. I mean, where does Auburn go now with the commitment of Chroma to Georgia?
Yeah, I don't think anything changes there in terms of the running back board. There were a couple other names that they were after earlier. DeJuan Morris was one, the USC commit. Turbo Rogers, the Alabama commit. They looked at a little bit, not a whole lot of traction there. Auburn's not really involved too much. And so they'll keep recruiting Chroma. They'll keep recruiting Shakai Mills Knight. And if something changes with either one of those guys, Auburn would be very, very happy about that. I think both are pretty big uphill battles as of now. Now, just throwing something out there, like if Lane Kiffin were to get hired at Florida or something like that, then that could open up the door for Shakai Mills Knight. That's a big if, and maybe Shakai would be interested in Florida or whatever. You can go down the rabbit hole of all that kind of stuff. But Auburn will keep recruiting those two guys. If they can't get one of those two, as of now, I would expect Alvin Henderson to be the only high school running back. And then you look to the portal and see kind of what's there.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mean, obviously this week news broke, and correct me if I mispronounce his name, Kale.
Yes, Kale
Ellis, reclassifying into the 2025 class. I mean, obviously, Auburn's got a haul right now. I think they've got six guys committed along the offensive line.
I think they're up to 6 now. They should be up to 6, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, so huge haul. Obviously, they're still probably throwing in a lot of effort to the Babalola recruitment. What does this reclassification for Kale Ellis mean for his future and how big of a what does it mean for him to be reclassified to the 2025 class?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important when you look at the center position and how it's situated for Auburn right now. Connor Lew is obviously your guy, and assuming that he's back next year, you always have to preface that now with the transfer portal. But assuming he's back next year, he'll be a junior. So Kale will come in. he'll be a summer guy because obviously he needs to finish up his classes there in high school. But he'll be a summer guy, and so he'll come in a little late and then theoretically be able to redshirt next year under Connor Liu. So if Connor were to decide after 3 years that he wants to go to the NFL or whatnot, at that point, Cale already has a year of college development, college weight training, all that stuff under his belt, and he'd be a redshirt freshman ready to step in. Or if Connor comes back for his senior season, then Cale would be stepping in, I guess, as a redshirt sophomore theoretically. So it's Cale can kick out to guard as well. He can do that a little bit. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility on the inside. And look, Cale is a guy who this was not really on his radar until he camped at Auburn over the summer. And he was incredible. I mean, and he was going up against some really good guys, a top 50 player in the country in the 2026 class, and winning consistently every single rep. And at that point, Auburn saw that, and Auburn saw how he had continued to transform his body and how he had gone from losing, some baby fat, some stuff like that, and turning into kind of a grown man already, even though he's just a junior in high school. And they threw out the idea, look, man, do you want to come in early? Do you want to, we can get your grades are in a good enough spot. We can get you to where you can reclassify and you can start getting developed in the weight training system under Coach Thornton, stuff like that, doing it early. And so now Auburn has its center. Obviously, you mentioned that they've got a ton of other offensive linemen in the class. Some of them could play center. None of them are truly built and have the experience of playing center, all those things like checking at the line of scrimmage, stuff like that, like Cale Ellis already does. So it's a nice addition to get your center, in a year early.
Yeah.
So kind of sticking in the trenches here, looking on the other side of the line, over at the defensive side, 3 of Auburn's top 4 commits in the class are defensive linemen, and Jared Smith, Malik Autry, and Jacaleb Falk. Could you see one or more of those guys playing as of next season, like getting that early playing time?
Yeah, I definitely think most of Auburn's class will have a chance to play right away. Malik is a guy who I think he needs to lose probably 20 or 30 pounds right now. I think he's a little too heavy at what he's playing at to be able to impact in the college game. But, if he's an early enrollee guy, you're talking about going through winter workouts, spring practice, all that stuff. And then he would have a chance to at least rotate in the defensive line, possibly, depending on how things go. Jared Smith is a guy who has taken a huge step forward his senior year. He's flashed a ton throughout the years. He's a guy who obviously has the size, has the look, but you were always waiting for just a little bit more. And he's given it this year at Thompson. So he's a guy who here's the thing. He should play right away. And I think he will rotate in, but he fits at the position where he would be behind Keldrick Falk, Amaris Williams, or if you kick him at Buck linebacker, he's behind Kieran Crawford, Joe Phillips, Jamonte Waller. There's a lot of young guys that are talented that will be above him. And same goes for JJ Falk, who could either be a Buck linebacker or a linebacker as well. So they will absolutely rotate in and play next year. I don't know how much they'll really be able to command a starting role just because of where they're at. The one guy who, this might come as a surprise to some people, who I think can command a starting role or quickly in the 2 deep right away next year is Jordan Crawford. I think he's fantastic. I think he's versatile where he's got the body of a nose tackle, but he can play a little bit of 1, little bit of 3 tech as well. And he's an interesting guy, and he is very powerful. He is a disruptor up front. He's a disruptor in the middle, and you don't see those guys all the time. So he's a guy that I would definitely watch for playing right away next year.
Awesome. Kind of sticking here with, let's talk about Sam Turner, the Georgia Tech commit. I think you even reported after, I can't remember what game it was, but he said, hey, look, if Deuce Knight commits, then, maybe that changes things. Deuce Knight's obviously on board now. I don't know if we mentioned him just a second ago, but Sam Turner, where does that recruitment stand, and how impactful was it for the Deuce Knight commitment?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Deuce earlier. The one position it truly does help you with is receivers for sure. And Sam Turner is one of those guys. I think it was the Cal game that he was in for. Yeah, it was definitely the Cal game, and he was upfront and honest, which I appreciated, saying, "Look, the passing game was not what I wanted to see at all." And like you mentioned, he said if Deuce Knight were to come, that would definitely change things because from his point of view, he's saying that he would know that there's a good quarterback in his class that would get him the ball, and so getting Deuce absolutely helped there. I don't know if it really mattered that Auburn got Deuce though, because I think Auburn is in a good enough position, or was in a good enough position anyway, to be able to flip him away from Georgia Tech. That's one who was supposed to officially visit for the Oklahoma game. It had to get pushed back because of the hurricane that came through Atlanta and moved his high school game from a Friday to a Saturday. So he's going to OV for the Vandy game. Wouldn't be shocked if he's already flipped to Auburn by that point, to be honest. I think things are moving along pretty well there. But he's a guy who not ranked the highest. He's kind of a middle of the pack 3-star. But Auburn is seeing enough from him where they really value him. They think he has some of the best hands in the class, is what I was told. They think that he's a guy who could come in and be in the two deep behind the Freeze four and all the young guys that Auburn has on their roster at wide receiver right now. They think he's a guy who can contribute, even though there's some really talented players above him.
All right.
So, sorry, go ahead, Logan.
Go ahead.
Okay. So you kind of touched on it earlier, but how confident are you that Auburn can continue to compete for Naeem Alford?
I'm really confident. I would honestly say that Auburn is probably the team to beat right now, and that's kind of, people will be like, well, that doesn't make any sense because he's committed to Ohio State. But when this goes down to signing day, I would project him to land at Auburn right now. Like if I put together a mock class or whatever, I would put him in Auburn's class. I think the proximity to home is absolutely playing a factor here. I think Auburn doing such a good job with in-state guys and a lot of his friends is important. I think he sees Auburn on the rise. He's got a great relationship with Hugh Freeze, got a good relationship with Coach Crime, Charles Kelly back there as well. So, look, it's gonna be a dogfight. Ohio State is not going down quietly. He's expected in Oregon this weekend as Oregon hosts Ohio State, for that matter. But I think Auburn, if I had to project him to a school right now, I would project him to Auburn over Ohio State and Oregon, to be honest.
I mean, unless you have any more 25 questions, this will be my last one. I mean, you've said before, and Auburn fans really haven't had to deal with this in the past few years, but you've got guys committed to other schools coming and visiting Auburn, and in order to recruit with the best, that's what you got to do, is you got to battle. But on the other side of things, you've got the top 3 class in the country. Your guys are going to go visit elsewhere too. I mean, so it's a never ending battle. So who are some guys in this class here that maybe haven't really fully shut their recruitment down and are still taking visits?
Yeah, so Malik Autry is one for sure. Ohio State is definitely still involved there, and he could go for a visit. Donovan Starr is the name that I'm watching the closest right now, the 4-star cornerback from up there in Ravenwood, Tennessee. He's been to Vandy a couple times, officially visited Illinois, going to hit Michigan. Alabama recently offered. He's going to go visit them as well. The thing about Donovan Starr and the thing about some of these guys, when a guy commits quickly, Donovan Starr committed right after his official visit. That was his first visit to Auburn. When a guy makes, I don't want to say a rash decision, but when a guy jumps to something, their recruitment is probably going to remain a little bit more open than a guy who really thinks through the process, takes his time a little bit, visits all the schools, and then comes to a choice. It opens up other schools the opportunity to keep hosting them on visits. Eric Winters, Georgia is still recruiting him heavily. Anquan Fagans is getting recruited by a collection of other schools, but I think that one will be a pretty tough flip. Jared Smith, we talked about. South Carolina is definitely still involved there. You could mention it for a lot of these guys, and a lot of Auburn fans, especially on the message boards, like to freak out a little bit, to put it nicely, and they lose their mind talking about, well, if they're committed to Auburn, why are they visiting elsewhere? And commitment doesn't mean what it used to anymore. And maybe that's true, but in the same vein, you're two seconds later, you're asking me what's up with Neem Offord, what's up with Deuce Knight. So if you want to flip from other programs, you have to understand that other schools are recruiting your guys as well. And the other thing I always say as well is, look, it's a pretty good sign if Ohio State and Michigan and Alabama and all these other schools are after your guys. That means you've got good ones. That means that other top programs in the country want your players, want your recruits, and that you've got good ones committed. So it's big dog recruiting, and you have to be willing to fight to the end, and that's just the way things go now.
So, obviously, Auburn's been doing a lot better with in-state recruiting since Hugh Freeze took over, and it was kind of starting to go in that direction before Nick Saban retired. But I kind of wanted to ask, in your opinion, is Auburn's uptick in luck of recruiting Alabama guys, does that have anything to do with Nick Saban no longer being in the picture?
I
Or
think
you think so?
sorry to cut you off, but
No,
I
you're
think
good.
so. I can answer the question right there, to be honest. Look, for one thing, Hugh Freeze has put a huge emphasis on it. That was his goal from day one. Um, and you look back at how Nick Saban and Alabama built their dynasties, the first thing he did was he locked down the state. He was getting every guy that he wanted. They were not leaving the state, and a lot of them weren't going to Auburn, for that matter. And Hugh Freeze has done that so far. He's got 8 of the top 10 guys in the 24/7 Sports rankings for the 2025 class. They're committed to Auburn. He's got a bunch of the 2026 guys committed already as well. And I think Nick Saban being gone is a large part of that. Now, before Alabama fans freak out on me, Alabama is obviously recruiting at a really, really high level still as well. And they're going across the country, and Kalen DeBoer and his staff are using a lot of their prior relationships that they've got in other places, like in California and whatnot, to get some top guys committed. But that doesn't mean that what Auburn has is bad either. I mean, they're taking advantage of in-state guys, not knowing this Alabama staff a little bit more than they clearly know the Auburn staff really well, and so Auburn is taking advantage of that, and it'll be interesting to see how things play out, not only on the field but future years. Will Alabama try and tap into the state a little bit more? Will they try and go into the backyard? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We don't have the answer right now. People can argue back and forth, and you can make a case either way. But in the transfer portal era, my personal take is getting guys closer to home is important, and so I think that's a big deal for Auburn. But like I said, we don't really know how it'll turn out quite yet.
So, Christian, Auburn's 2026 class is also a top 5 class. You guys have it at number 5 in the nation right now. Which of these 5 commitments that are already a part of it do you think could make the earliest impact?
Yeah, and the class was, I think, number 2 before Cale Ellis reclassified, and Auburn was number 1 there for a while as well. So it's a really solid foundation of the class of guys that can make an early impact. It's tough because they still are in the middle of their junior year and they've got to play their senior year as well. But you probably have to look at the top guy first, and Hezekiah Harris, really, really twitchy edge rusher up there at Mae Jemison High School. He's still pretty raw, but by the time he gets to Auburn, he will probably have developed a little bit more. And he's a guy that's so quick and so twitchy off the edge that if you just put him out there in certain packages on defense, just tell him to go out there and make a play, get to the quarterback, and he can probably do that a handful of times a game. Jermichael Garrett is another guy at linebacker who I think is not raw at all. And I think by the time he gets to Auburn, he could be very polished and have a chance to make an impact right away as well.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the recruiting, you go back to last year's class with Waller and Phillips. Obviously, they've got a guy like Jared Smith in this year, potentially a Caleb Falk, and then a guy like you just mentioned, and Hezekiah Harris. They're still in the running for a Tank
Jones. Yep.
Right, that's right. A lot of these, edge guys. These are very talented edge guys. I mean, that's a pretty prominent position. You're seeing that position become more of a highlight and focus, maybe in recruiting. I mean, who's Josh Aldridge just going out and getting some pretty pretty good talent there. I mean, what else do you see a guy like Tank Jones coming into that 26 class, or just kind of maybe Hezekiah Harris? What's going on there?
I think Tank Jones is certainly possible. I think Alabama has made a move there and might be the favorite right now, but we have well over a year until it's his time to sign. So we'll see how things go there. Trenton Henderson, another top 50 player in the country from Pensacola Catholic, is an edge rusher that Auburn is certainly in with. Same for Jordan Carter, top 50 player in the country from Douglas County in Georgia, edge rusher. Auburn has a ton of guys in 26, and they will get probably 2 or 3. And then from there, it's Logan, you mentioned it. There are so many guys in that room, the edge and defensive end, and you can kind of mix and match what you want in different schemes and different sets and all that different stuff between. But I'm trying to think by the time 26 comes around, Keldrick Falk probably won't be on the roster anymore. He'll be on an NFL roster. But you would have Amaris Williams. You would have Jamonte Waller, Joe Phillips. You would have the 25 guys, Jared Smith, Caleb Falk, potentially, 26 guys. I mean, you are loaded in that room with a collection of different talent. There's a lot of different guys that can do a lot of different things there. So it's really fun for an Auburn fan to think about what that defensive front is going to look like over the next couple of years as Hugh Freeze and Aldridge and Vontrell King Williams and all those guys continue to bring in their guys in that room.
Yeah. This is one more question and we can get out of here. What obviously results on the field right now are not great, but you're still sitting with the number 3 class in 25 and a top 5 class in 26. In your opinion, you talk to these guys a little bit more than we do. What does that have any kind of effect on a guy's recruitment? Obviously, it has effect with some guys, and they're looking at it. But if Auburn doesn't finish off this season with a high note or on a high note, does that have any kind of impact on the 25 class?
So far, so good is what it's been at. Guys have been okay with the way things are going. They're seeing, despite the fact that Auburn has a worse record on the field, they're seeing a little bit more explosive plays on offense. They're seeing a good defense. They're seeing where things are going, especially with the young guys. They just aren't seeing the wins behind them. If Auburn continues to slide in the second half of the season and they go 3-9 or 4-8, then things could get tricky a little bit, in my opinion. You could probably lose a couple guys, but look, even if you get to 7-5 somehow or 6-6 in the second half of the season, you'll still probably lose some guys because that's just how recruiting goes now. You're always going to lose some guys at the end. Every school will. There's flip season. It's always going to happen. So for Auburn, it is try and continue to show improvement, try and continue to show young guys and how they're making an impact and flashing. Try and get to 6 wins if possible, and then hold on to your class as much as you can. Hold on to the guys that you want the most, and see where things kind of finish. I still think Auburn has a really good chance, even if they go 5-7. I think they have a good chance still to sign a top 5 class, which is crazy to think about, but I certainly think it's still possible.
Cool. Well, Christian, I think that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, man.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Anytime you guys want me to hop on, I'm always available.
So, Logan, I think we're going to record again on Sunday to talk about what Missouri looks like this weekend. Is that still the plan?
Sounds good.
Awesome. If there's a change of plans, we will make those known on our social media. But between now and the next time, thank you for listening.